My stepsister announced her engagement the day after mine, then scheduled her wedding for the day before. She accidentally invited all my guests to hers instead. I smiled and congratulated her. 3 weeks later, her fiancé was sobbing on my couch after opening the email I sent him. I always knew my relationship with Mia was complicated. From the moment her father married my mother when we were both 14, we existed in a state of cold politeness that never quite warmed into genuine sisterhood. We were too different, thrown together too late, and perhaps too similar in our stubbornness to ever fully connect. Still, I never expected her to try to steal my wedding. Ryan proposed on a Saturday in early April. We'd been dating for 2 years, having met at my college friend Alyssa's housewarming party. He wasn't what I expected, quieter than my usual type, thoughtful where others had been impulsive. On our first date, we discovered a shared love of terrible 80s sci-fi movies, the kind with rubber monsters and synthesizer soundtracks. By the third date, I knew there was something different about him, something that made me examine my own patterns and why they'd always led to eventual disappointment. The proposal itself was simple and perfect. We were hiking in the mountains, and when we reached the overlook at Falcon Point, he'd gotten down on one knee, pulled out a ring box, and said the words I hadn't realized I'd been waiting to hear. "Emma, you're my best friend, my favorite critic of bad movies, and the person I want to wake up next to for the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" The ring wasn't massive, we're both practical people with student loans still to pay, but it was exactly what I would have chosen, a vintage-style setting with a modest diamond flanked by tiny sapphires. More importantly, it was on my finger, placed there by a man who knew me better than anyone ever had. We celebrated with champagne at the summit, called our families from the trail when we finally got cell service again, and spent the evening making lists of people to invite and places to consider for the venue. By Sunday night, we'd settled on a June wedding the following year at Lakeside Gardens, a beautiful venue just outside the city. We checked their website and found they had an opening on June 12th. Perfect timing, perfect location. Monday morning, I posted the obligatory ring photo on Instagram with a caption that managed to be both excited and self-deprecating, very on-brand for me. The congratulations poured in, including a perfectly pleasant comment from Mia, "Congrats. The ring is cute." That evening, my mother called, her voice pitched higher than normal, always a sign of either extreme excitement or carefully controlled frustration. "Honey, have you spoken to Mia today?" "No, why?" She commented on my engagement post, "Oh." A pause. "Well, I just got off the phone with James. Apparently, Thomas proposed to Mia yesterday." Something cold settled in my stomach. Yesterday? As in, the day after Ryan proposed to me? Yes, isn't that a coincidence? James says they've been dating for about 4 months. I didn't even realize it was that serious. 4 months? Ryan and I had been together for 2 years before getting engaged, building a solid foundation for our future. Mia and Thomas had barely made it through a season. "That's fast," I said carefully. "Well, you know Mia. When she knows what she wants, she goes for it." My mother's voice held a note of defensiveness. Ever since she'd married James, she'd been careful not to show any preference between her biological daughter and her stepdaughter, often to the point of overlooking Mia's more problematic behaviors. "Did they set a date?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Actually, yes. They're thinking June 11th next year. Mia mentioned you're getting married that weekend too, so family from out of town won't have to make 2 trips. Isn't that considerate?" June 11th. The day before my wedding. At that moment, I knew this wasn't a coincidence, but I kept my voice neutral. "Where are they having it?" "Let me see, James mentioned it. Lakeside Gardens, I think? Mia said it's where you're having yours, so the family will already know how to get there." "Of course. The same venue." I closed my eyes, counting silently to 10 before responding. "Mom, don't you think it's a little strange that Mia got engaged immediately after me and is now planning her wedding at the same venue the day before mine?" My mother's sigh was audible. "Emma, please don't start with the Mia thing again. You've always been so competitive with her." "Competitive? Mom, I've never. Just be happy for her like she's happy for you. This could be a wonderful chance for the two of you to bond, planning your weddings together. Maybe even shop for dresses together." I knew there was no point in continuing this conversation. My mother had always been blind to the dynamic between Mia and me, preferring to believe we were simply strong-willed sisters rather than acknowledging Mia's pattern of one-upmanship. When I told Ryan about the conversation, he was more bewildered than angry. "That's weird, right? I'm not just biased because I'm marrying you?" He ran a hand through his hair, a habit when he's processing something unexpected. "It's definitely weird," I confirmed. "But it's classic Mia. Remember when I got that promotion last year and suddenly she was starting her own company? The online boutique that lasted 6 weeks? Exactly. Or when I ran that half marathon, and she immediately signed up for a full marathon. Which she dropped out of after 8 miles, Ryan finished. I see the pattern. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. So what do we do? Change our date? Look for a different venue? I considered it briefly, then shook my head. No. That's what she wants. We secured our date first, we made our plans first. I'm not going to let her derail them. That's my girl, Ryan said, kissing the top of my head. Take no prisoners, Emma is my favorite Emma. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? I said with more confidence than I felt. It'll be awkward, but we'll get through it. I had no idea then just how much I was underestimating Mia's determination to make her wedding the main event, and mine the forgettable afterthought. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks later when my friend Alyssa texted me, "Hey, weird question, but did you change your wedding date? I just gotta save the date for June 11th from your sister." My heart sank. Stepsister, I corrected. And no, our wedding is still June 12th. What exactly did the save the date say? Alyssa sent a photo. There it was in elegant script: Mia Lawson and Thomas Bennett request the pleasure of your company as they join in marriage, June 11th at Lakeside Gardens. Standard wording, beautiful design. What wasn't standard was that Alyssa had received it at all. She and Mia had met perhaps twice at family gatherings over the years. They certainly weren't close enough to warrant a wedding invitation. Over the next few days, similar messages arrived from other friends, colleagues, even my favorite professor from college whom I kept in touch with and had been planning to invite to our wedding. All had received Mia's save the dates. All were confused. I finally confronted Mia during our mother's birthday dinner. I'd waited until we had a moment alone, stepping out onto the restaurant's patio while the others were examining the dessert menu. "Mia, why are you sending save the dates to my friends?" She turned to me with wide, innocent eyes, a look I'd seen countless times over the years. "What are you talking about?" "My college friends, my colleagues, people you barely know or have never met, they're all receiving save the dates for your wedding." "Oh." She pressed a hand to her chest, the large diamond on her finger catching the light. Thomas had apparently spared no expense on the ring, despite the short timeline of their relationship. There must have been a mix-up with the lists. "Mom gave me your address book to help with some family addresses, and I must have accidentally used your friend list too." "My address book? What address book? All my contacts are digital." Mia waved a hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. The contact list Mom had. Anyway, it's not a big deal, is it? Now they know about both weddings and can choose which one works better for their schedule." The calculated innocence in her voice made my blood boil, but years of dealing with Mia had taught me to recognize when I was being baited. Showing anger would only reinforce her narrative that I was the unreasonable, jealous stepsister. "I'd appreciate it if you'd send a correction," I said evenly. "Explain that it was a mistake and that they should expect an invitation to my wedding on the 12th. "That's silly," Mia laughed. "They've already got the information now. Besides, wouldn't it be awkward to basically uninvite them to my wedding? That seems so rude." Before I could respond, our mother pushed open the patio door. "There you two are. We're ordering dessert. What are you talking about so seriously out here?" "Wedding planning," Mia said brightly, linking her arm through our mother's. "Emma's being so helpful with ideas. Sisters planning weddings together, isn't it sweet?" I plastered on a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Super sweet. When I got home that night, I discovered that Mia's sabotage went even deeper than I'd realized. Ryan had received a concerned call from his parents, who had also received Mia's save the date and were confused about which date was correct. So had his brother, his cousin, and 2 of his closest friends, none of whom had ever met Mia. "How did she even get their addresses?" Ryan asked, bewildered. I had a sinking suspicion. "Remember that preliminary guest list we made? The one in that Google Doc we shared with my mom so she could add any family members we might have forgotten?" Ryan's expression darkened. "She wouldn't." "She absolutely would." We checked the access history on the document. Sure enough, there had been a view from an unknown user 3 days after we'd shared it with my mother, likely Mia, using my mother's laptop while visiting. It was becoming clear that Mia's accidental mix-up was anything but. She had deliberately targeted our entire guest list, sending her save the dates to everyone we were planning to invite. The question was why. Was it simple competition? One-upmanship taken to a new level? Or was there something more calculated happening? I called my mother the next morning, trying one more time to make her see what was happening. "Mom, Mia sent save the dates to Ryan's family. People she's never met. That's not a mix-up, that's deliberate." "Emma, I'm sure there's an explanation. Why don't you talk to her directly instead of making accusations to me?" I did talk to her. She brushed it off like it was no big deal. "Well, maybe it isn't. So a few extra people got invited to her wedding. Why are you so upset about this?" I tried a different approach. "Think about it logically, Mom. Why would Mia schedule her wedding the day before mine, at the same venue, and then invite all the same people? Don't you think that's going to create confusion and complications? My mother was quiet for a moment. I suppose when you put it that way, it does seem a bit inconsiderate. I'll talk to her. That conversation apparently went nowhere because the next day, Mia posted on Instagram about people who can't be happy for others' joy, how sad it is when jealousy ruins family relationships. She didn't name me directly, but the implication was clear. The comments section filled with supportive messages from her friends, along with a few confused responses from mutual acquaintances who seemed unsure about what was happening but felt compelled to take a side. I refused to engage publicly. Instead, I vented to Ryan in the privacy of our apartment, pacing back and forth while he watched with a mixture of concern and barely concealed amusement at my colorful descriptions of Mia's character. We could just change our date, he suggested again. Find a different venue. Avoid the whole circus. And let her win? No way. I stopped pacing and sat next to him on the couch. Besides, at this point, I'm curious to see what her endgame is. This level of effort has to have a purpose beyond simply upstaging me. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Maybe she's just that petty? Maybe, I conceded. But I can't shake the feeling there's something more going on. Nobody plans a shotgun wedding after 4 months of dating with this much determination unless there's an underlying reason. It was that thought that led me down a path I might not otherwise have taken. If Mia was going to play dirty, perhaps it was time I did a little digging of my own. My first instinct was to look more closely at Thomas. I'd met him briefly once, at a family dinner shortly after they started dating. He was handsome in a polished way, designer clothes, perfect haircut, the kind of tan that suggested regular visits to exclusive resorts. He worked in financial consulting, a deliberately vague profession that could mean anything from legitimate investment advising to borderline scam artistry. During that dinner, he'd been charming, attentive to Mia, respectful to her father, and full of impressive-sounding anecdotes about clients he'd helped and deals he'd closed. Something about him had struck me as performative, but I dismissed it as the natural awkwardness of meeting your girlfriend's family for the first time. Now, I wondered if my initial instinct had been correct. I started with simple online searches. Thomas Bennett was a common enough name, but adding qualifiers like his approximate age, location, and profession helped narrow things down. His LinkedIn profile listed an impressive resume, Wharton MBA, positions at several prestigious firms, glowing recommendations from connections. His Facebook profile showed a man who enjoyed the finer things, yachting trips, charity galas, skiing in Aspen. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. On a hunch, I ran a reverse image search on several of his profile pictures. Most returned only his own social media accounts, but one, a photo of him at a charity gala 3 years ago, led me to a local society magazine's coverage of the event. The caption listed him as Thomas Burrell, with fiancée Eliza Cunningham. Thomas Burrell, not Bennett. And fiancée, not just date. My pulse quickened. I searched for Thomas Burrell instead and found another LinkedIn profile, nearly identical to the Bennett one but with subtle differences in the employment timeline. More searches revealed social media accounts that had been abandoned approximately 2 years ago, right around the time Thomas Bennett seemed to have appeared in our city. A deeper dive uncovered an engagement announcement in the same Society magazine. Mr. and Mrs. Jonathan Cunningham are pleased to announce the engagement of their daughter, Eliza Jane, to Thomas William Burrell. A June wedding is planned. June. Just like Mia's planned wedding. But there was no follow-up wedding announcement. Instead, after more digging, I found a small item in the Society pages from 3 months later. The engagement of Eliza Cunningham to Thomas Burrell has been ended by mutual agreement. The Cunningham family requests privacy at this time. Mutual agreement. That phrasing usually masked a more complicated reality. I searched for Eliza Cunningham and found her still active Instagram account. Unlike Thomas's carefully curated profile, hers featured raw, honest posts about life's ups and downs. Scrolling back 2 years, I found what I was looking for, a long post about healing from betrayal and learning to trust again. Sometimes the people who seem the most perfect are hiding the darkest secrets, she'd written. 2 months from what should have been my wedding day, I'm grateful for the financial irregularities that led me to discover who TB really was before it was too late. Financial irregularities. The pieces were starting to come together. Further searches revealed a pattern. Thomas Burrell/Bennett had been engaged at least twice before, both times to women from wealthy families, both engagements mysteriously ending shortly before the wedding. In each case, there were vague references to financial concerns or betrayals of trust. I created a timeline on a spreadsheet, tracking his movements, name changes, and relationships. A pattern emerged. He would appear in a new city, integrate himself into social circles with access to wealth, target a woman with family money or independent means, engage in a whirlwind romance culminating in a quick engagement, and then something would happen, often involving money, before the wedding could take place. The most damning evidence came from a private Facebook group I discovered through a careful search of keywords related to financial scams and broken engagements. The group, called Survivors of Thomas B., had only 8 members but contained detailed accounts from 3 women who had been engaged to the same man under slightly different names. I requested to join, creating a brief post explaining my situation and concern for my stepsister. Within hours, I was approved and received messages from 2 of the women. "Get your sister away from him immediately," wrote one. By the time I realized what was happening, he had borrowed nearly $90,000 for business opportunities that never existed. "He's charming and seems so genuine," added another. I was completely blindsided. He targeted me right after my grandmother died and I received my inheritance. The engagement ring he gave me was paid for with my own money, as I later discovered. I spent hours reading their stories, each one confirming my suspicions and adding new details to Thomas's pattern of deception. One woman shared screenshots of text messages where he discussed his long game with a friend, joking about finding another rich one and how he'd make it to the altar this time. The most recent victim had been burned just 8 months ago in another city 3 states away. The timeline matched perfectly. Thomas had appeared in our city, with a new name variation, shortly after disappearing from his previous hunting ground. And now he was engaged to Mia, whose family wealth was substantial. James had built a successful construction business from nothing, eventually expanding into real estate development. While not billionaires, they lived very comfortably, with vacation properties and generous trust funds for both Mia and her younger brother. I had found my answer. The rushed engagement, the determination to have a quick wedding, it all made sense now. Thomas wasn't playing the long game this time. He was accelerating his timeline, perhaps because he'd had too many close calls with his previous targets. The question now was what to do with this information. My first instinct was to go directly to Mia, but our complicated relationship made that problematic. She would likely dismiss anything I presented as jealousy or sabotage. Our parents might be more receptive, but they too might question my motives, especially given the tension surrounding the dueling weddings. After careful consideration, I decided on a different approach. I compiled everything I had found: screenshots, timelines, testimonials from the other women, public records showing name changes, into a comprehensive document. I created redacted versions of the most sensitive information to protect the privacy of Thomas's previous targets but included contact information for those who had agreed to speak directly to Mia if needed. Then I sent it all to Thomas himself. The email was simple: "I know everything. Either you end this engagement yourself by Friday, or this information goes to Mia, her father, and their family lawyer." I included enough detailed evidence in the attached files to make it clear this wasn't a bluff. Then I waited. 48 hours later, my doorbell rang on a Wednesday evening. Ryan was at his weekly basketball game with friends, leaving me alone when I opened the door to find Thomas standing there, looking considerably less polished than in his social media photos. His eyes were bloodshot, his expensive shirt wrinkled as if he'd been wearing it for days. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. I considered turning him away but decided that a controlled conversation might be the cleanest resolution. I stepped aside, allowing him into our apartment but leaving the door conspicuously open. "How did you find all that stuff?" he asked as soon as we were in the living room. "Some of those accounts were private." I gestured for him to sit on the couch while I took the armchair opposite, maintaining distance. "Nothing online is ever truly private, Thomas. Or should I call you Tom? Tommy? How many variations have you used?" He sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair, a gesture that might have seemed vulnerable and authentic if I hadn't just spent days documenting his pattern of calculated manipulation. "Does Mia know?" he asked, looking up at me with what appeared to be genuine fear. "Not yet. That depends on you." He nodded slowly. "That's why I'm here. I ended things with her last night." This surprised me. I had expected more resistance, perhaps attempts at bargaining or threatening. Just like that? What choice did I have? "You've got enough to ruin me, not just with Mia but everywhere." "That file you compiled." He shook his head. "It's comprehensive. How long did you spend on this?" "Long enough to know exactly who I'm dealing with." Thomas leaned back, a bitter smile crossing his face. "And here I thought you were the easy one. Mia always described you as passive, controllable. Said you'd roll over if anyone confronted you directly." The characterization stung, though it shouldn't have surprised me. Mia doesn't know me as well as she thinks. Clearly. He studied me with newfound respect or perhaps caution. "So what happens now?" "You've got what you wanted, the engagement is off. Mia is devastated, by the way. Currently telling everyone I wasn't ready for commitment, that I've got intimacy issues. It's actually a perfect cover story." "Why are you here, Thomas? If you've already ended things, what do you want from me?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I want to know if you're still planning to expose me to her family. To those online communities that track people like people with my history." "You mean scammers? Con artists? What exactly should I call what you do?" "I prefer relationship opportunist," he said with a ghost of his former charm. Then, seeing my disgusted expression, he sighed. Look, I never physically hurt anyone. I never threatened or blackmailed. Yes, I encouraged financial entanglements that benefited me. But these women weren't exactly destitute afterward. That's how you justify it? They could afford to lose the money, so it's fine to defraud them? I'm not here for moral judgment, he snapped, then visibly composed himself. I'm here to negotiate. I've done what you asked. I've ended things with Mia cleanly, given her a face-saving story, and I'm prepared to leave town by the end of the month. In exchange, I'm asking you to keep that file to yourself. I considered his proposal. My primary goal had been to protect Mia, despite our differences. That was accomplished. Did I have an obligation to warn others or seek some form of justice for his previous victims? The women you scammed deserve better than for you to just move on to the next target, I said finally, and what would exposing me do for them? He countered. Return their money? Heal their trust issues? No. It would just drag them into a public spectacle they've already worked hard to put behind them. He had a point, though I hated to admit it. Several of the women had mentioned the shame they felt at being deceived, their reluctance to pursue legal action that would expose their vulnerability. What guarantee do I have that you won't just do this again to someone else? Thomas laughed humorlessly. None, I suppose. But your file has made this particular career path significantly more hazardous for me. I'm not stupid. I know when it's time to pivot to something new. We negotiated for nearly an hour. In the end, I agreed not to share the file publicly or with Mia's family on several conditions. Thomas would return the engagement ring, which I suspected had been purchased with a loan from Mia or her father, make no further contact with Mia or anyone in our family, and leave the state permanently. Additionally, he would write letters of apology to his previous victims, which I would forward anonymously through the support group. It wasn't justice in the traditional sense, but it was closure of a sort. As Thomas was leaving, looking both defeated and strangely relieved, he paused at the door. You know, in another life, you and I might have made a good team. You've got talents you're wasting in. He gestured vaguely at our modestly furnished apartment, whatever normal life this is. Goodbye, Thomas, I said firmly. I'd wish you well, but we both know I don't mean it. After he left, I sat in silence for a long time, processing the encounter. When Ryan came home, sweaty from basketball and full of stories about the game, I simply said, Mia's engagement is off. Thomas broke things off last night. Ryan's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? What happened? Let's just say I helped him realize they weren't compatible long-term. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Ryan asked softly, Are you going to tell me the whole story someday? I turned to face him in the darkness. Yes. But not yet. Let's get through this wedding season first. He pulled me closer. Speaking of which, what happens with Mia's wedding now? The save the dates, the venue on the 11th? I don't know, I admitted. But whatever drama unfolds, we're still getting married on June 12th, exactly as planned. The aftermath of Mia's broken engagement unfolded exactly as I would have predicted for someone who had spent most of her life orchestrating dramas with herself at the center. Her Instagram transformed into a tasteful documentation of heartbreak, pensive selfies with minimal makeup, inspirational quotes about resilience, carefully worded posts about trusting the universe's timing. She never mentioned Thomas by name in these posts, but she didn't have to. The comment sections filled with supportive messages, expressions of outrage on her behalf, and vague threats toward the unnamed man who had broken her heart. Our mother called me 3 days after the breakup, her voice tight with concern. Have you spoken to Mia? She's devastated. I heard, I said neutrally. Breakups are hard. Emma, this is more than a breakup. They were engaged. The save the dates had already gone out. I bit back the urge to point out that those save the dates had gone primarily to people who should never have received them in the first place. I'm sure she'll be okay, Mom. Mia's always been resilient. I thought you might reach out to her, my mother pressed. You know, sister to sister. You've been through breakups before. I'll send her a text, I promised, knowing that more direct contact would likely be rebuffed. True to my word, I did text Mia, heard about you and Thomas. I'm sorry things didn't work out. Her response came hours later, Are you really? I chose not to engage with the implied accusation. Instead, I wrote, Breakups are painful, regardless of the circumstances. I hope you're taking care of yourself. 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her next message arrived, the wedding's cancelled, obviously. You win. I stared at those words, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the wedding competition was over. Frustration that even now, Mia saw this as a contest rather than a narrow escape from a practiced con artist. Sadness for the relationship we had never managed to build despite years of existing in each other's orbits. This wasn't a competition, Mia, I wrote back. I'm genuinely glad you found out you weren't compatible before the wedding rather than after. She didn't respond. In the weeks that followed, I learned through family channels that Mia had cancelled the venue reservation and was refusing to discuss the breakup in detail with anyone, including her father. She had taken a mental health break from her job at an upscale boutique and was spending most of her time at her father's lake house, posting occasional cryptic updates that alternated between declarations of newfound independence and thinly veiled references to betrayal. Meanwhile, Ryan and I continued our wedding planning without the shadow of Mia's competing event. We sent out our actual invitations, confirmed details with vendors, and gradually settled into the excitement and occasional stress that comes with preparing for a major life event. 3 weeks after Thomas disappeared from Mia's life, I received an unexpected message on Instagram from a name I didn't recognize. Opening it revealed a simple question: "Are you the Emma who sent the file about Thomas B?" It was Eliza Cunningham, one of Thomas's previous targets. I confirmed my identity, and we moved our conversation to a more secure platform where she expressed her gratitude. "We've been tracking him for nearly 2 years," she wrote. "Every time we got close to warning his new target, he'd disappear and resurface elsewhere with a new variation of his name. How did you figure it out so quickly?" I explained about the competing weddings, the unusual timeline, and my resulting suspicions. "Your stepsister is lucky," Eliza replied. "Most of us didn't have anyone looking out for us. By the time friends or family raised concerns, we were already emotionally and financially entangled. The shame of admitting you've been deceived keeps many victims silent." Over the course of several conversations, Eliza shared more details about Thomas's methods, how he researched his targets thoroughly, tailoring his personality and interests to match theirs, how he isolated them from skeptical friends, how he gradually introduced financial opportunities that required immediate investment. "Has he contacted you since?" she asked. "No. He agreed to leave town and avoid any further contact with my family." "He'll stick to that," Eliza predicted. "He avoids confrontation once he's been exposed. But he'll just set up shop somewhere new, with a slightly adjusted approach based on what he learned from this failure." Her words troubled me. Had I done enough? Should I have pursued more formal action, despite the complications and potential for additional harm to his previous victims? Eliza seemed to sense my concern. "You did the right thing for your situation. Each of us has to find our own resolution." For me, it was creating the support group and tracking his movements to warn others when possible. For another woman in our group, it was pressing charges for fraud, though the case was eventually dropped for lack of evidence. There's no perfect justice for someone like him. Her perspective helped ease my lingering doubts. I hadn't stopped Thomas permanently, but I had protected Mia and created enough documentation that his future deceptions would be more difficult to execute. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but few things in life are. 2 months later, our wedding day arrived, still June 12th at Lakeside Gardens, exactly as we'd planned before all the drama. The weather was perfect, the venue decorated exactly as I'd envisioned, and Ryan's face when I walked down the aisle made every moment of stress worthwhile. Mia did not attend. My mother had made excuses about her still being too raw from her broken engagement, but I suspected the real reason was simpler: pride. Attending my wedding would have meant acknowledging her failed attempt to overshadow it. During the reception, as Ryan and I moved between tables greeting our guests, Alyssa pulled me aside. "You never told me what happened with your stepsister's fiancé," she said, champagne glass in hand. "One minute she's sending save the dates to everyone you know, the next minute he's gone and she's posting cryptic healing journeys on Instagram." I smiled. Let's just say I did some research that helped him realize their relationship wasn't viable long-term. Alyssa's eyes widened. "Emma Bennett, did you sabotage your stepsister's wedding?" "Of course not," I said honestly. "I just made sure she had all the relevant information about the man she was planning to marry. The fact that it ended their engagement was his decision, not mine." "Ah." Alyssa clearly didn't believe my innocent tone. "Remind me never to cross you." As the evening progressed into night, Ryan and I shared our first dance, cut the cake, and participated in all the traditional wedding moments. Looking around at our friends and family celebrating with us, I felt a brief pang of regret that Mia wasn't among them. Despite everything, she was family, and some part of me had always hoped we might eventually find common ground. Later that night, after most guests had departed and we were preparing to leave for our hotel, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a private Instagram message from Mia. "The flowers were beautiful. The photos your mom sent looked nice." It wasn't quite an olive branch, but it wasn't continued hostility either. I replied simply, "Thank you. I hope you're doing well." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "How did you know?" "About Thomas, I mean. Dad hired a pie after everything fell apart. The report came back yesterday. He wasn't who he said he was." I considered my response carefully. I had concerns about the timeline and did some research. "And you didn't tell me? You just let me get humiliated when he dumped me out of nowhere?" There it was, the familiar Mia victim narrative, reframing events to position herself as the wrong party regardless of circumstances. Would you have believed me if I had come to you with concerns? I asked honestly. The three dots appeared and disappeared multiple times before her reply came, probably not. It was possibly the most honest thing Mia had ever said to me. I wrote back, I'm sorry things happened the way they did. No one deserves to be deceived like that, not even you. The response took nearly 10 minutes. Dad's furious. Says there were red flags he ignored because I seemed so happy. Now he's questioning every financial decision he ever let me make. Parents tend to blame themselves when things go wrong, I replied. Give him time. He kept asking if you knew something. If that's why your wedding is still happening and mine isn't. I told him no. I stared at that message, uncertain how to respond. Mia had lied to protect her pride, but also inadvertently protected me from difficult questions about how exactly I'd uncovered Thomas's deception. Thank you, I wrote finally. Another long pause. I didn't do it for you. I did it because the truth would make me look even more pathetic. That was the Mia I knew, incapable of allowing even a moment of genuine connection without reasserting her defensive walls. Still, I appreciate it, I replied. Get some rest, Mia. Things will look clearer with time. Whatever. Congrats on your wedding, I guess. And with that thoroughly Mia-like conclusion, our exchange ended. I put my phone away and rejoined Ryan, who was chatting with the last remaining guests. Everything okay? He asked when we were finally alone, waiting for our ride to the hotel. Just Mia, sending what passes for congratulations in her world. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned about vengeful stepsister shenanigans on our honeymoon? I laughed, leaning against his shoulder. No. I think we've seen the last of Mia's wedding sabotage attempts. Good, because I'd hate to find her hiding in our suitcase when we get to Hawaii. As we climbed into the car, Rice still clinging to our clothes and happiness warming me from within, I felt the final pieces of tension release from my shoulders. The competition was over, Thomas was gone, and the path ahead was clear of the obstacles Mia had tried to place in our way. We returned from our honeymoon to discover that life had continued its inevitable forward motion in our absence. My mother had visited Mia at the lake house and reported that she seemed to be finding herself, whatever that meant. James had apparently hired financial forensic experts to determine whether Thomas had accessed any family accounts during their relationship. And our apartment was exactly as we'd left it, but somehow felt different now that we were returning to it as a married couple. 2 months passed in the pleasant blur of newlywed life and the process of writing thank you cards, changing my last name on various documents, and settling into our new reality. Mia remained at the lake house, her social media shifting from heartbreak to spiritual awakening, complete with yoga poses at sunset and quotes about manifestation. Then, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, my doorbell rang. Opening it revealed Mia, looking both uncomfortable and determined. Can I come in? She asked, without greeting or preamble. Surprised, I stepped aside, allowing her into our apartment. She was dressed more casually than I'd seen her in years, jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, minimal makeup. The lake house retreat had apparently inspired a style evolution. Nice place, she said, looking around with what seemed like genuine interest rather than her usual evaluative scan for flaws or signs of financial limitations. Thanks. Would you like some tea? Coffee? Tea would be nice. If you have it. I moved to the kitchen, putting the kettle on while Mia perched awkwardly on one of our bar stools. Neither of us spoke until I placed a mug of herbal tea in front of her. I'm moving to Seattle, she announced after taking a sip. Next month. Seattle? That's far. Any particular reason? I got a job with a boutique there. Higher end than where I was working before. Better growth potential. She traced the rim of her mug with one finger. And it's not here. I understood the subtext. After the public embarrassment of her broken engagement and cancelled wedding, a fresh start in a new city held obvious appeal. I think that sounds like a good move, I said honestly. Seattle's a great city. She nodded, still not meeting my eyes directly. I told Mom last night. She's upset, of course. Thinks I'm running away from my problems instead of facing them. A bitter smile flickered across her face. As if she's ever directly faced a problem in her life. The assessment of our mother wasn't entirely unfair. Karen Bennett was the queen of pleasant denial, preferring to smooth over conflicts rather than address their root causes. Sometimes distance helps provide perspective, I offered. It doesn't have to be running away. Mia looked up then, studying my face as if seeing it clearly for the first time. Why are you being nice to me? After everything I did with the wedding, you should be gloating or at least acting smug. What would be the point of that? It's what I would do, she admitted. If I'd won. That's the difference, I guess. I never saw it as a competition to win. She absorbed this, sipping her tea thoughtfully. I never understood that about you. How you could just Not compete. Not need to be the best or the first or the most special. It seemed like weakness to me. And now? I prompted when she didn't continue. Now I think maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it takes more strength to not always be fighting for position. It was possibly the most insightful thing I'd ever heard Mia say, and certainly the closest she'd ever come to acknowledging her own patterns of behavior. Anyway, she continued, setting down her mug. I didn't come here to have some deep stepsister's heart-to-heart. I came because Dad wanted me to give you this before I leave. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrap package. What is it? I asked, not reaching for it immediately. A wedding gift, I think. Dad was very mysterious about it. Said it was important that I deliver it in person. Curious, I accepted the package and carefully removed the wrapping paper. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully crafted with an inlaid design on the lid. When I opened it, I found a folded note resting on top of what appeared to be old photographs. The note was in James's handwriting. Emma, these belong to your father. He asked me to keep them for you until the right time. Your wedding seemed appropriate, but circumstances delayed the delivery. I hope they bring you joy. James, my father had died when I was 12, long before my mother met James. The two men had never met, which made the note all the more puzzling. With slightly trembling fingers, I lifted out the photographs. They showed a much younger version of my father holding a baby, me, while standing in front of a small house I didn't recognize. In another, he was laughing at something off camera, his face more carefree than I remembered ever seeing it. What are they? Mia asked, curiosity overcoming her usual reserve. Photos of my dad. But I don't understand how James had them. There was something else in the box, a small velvet pouch. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature paint palette. Dad was an artist, I said softly, more to myself than to Mia. Before he got sick and had to take corporate jobs to pay the medical bills. I barely remember him painting. Mia was watching me with an odd expression. There's more to the story. Dad told me last night when he gave me the box. Apparently, your father and my father knew each other in college. They were friends before they went their separate ways career-wise. When your dad got sick, he contacted my dad. They hadn't spoken in years, but he knew my dad had done well financially. He asked James to look out for you if anything happened to him. I stared at her, stunned. That's impossible. Mom never mentioned anything like that. When she met James, it was presented as a completely new relationship. Mia shrugged. Dad said your mom didn't know. That he'd kept an eye on you from a distance for years, but when he met your mom at that charity thing and realized who she was, he took it as some kind of sign. My mind was reeling. The man I'd known as my stepfather for 14 years had actually been connected to my life long before he married my mother? Had been, in some sense, honoring a promise to my father? Why didn't he ever tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He said he was waiting for the right time. That he didn't want to complicate your relationship with your mom or make you feel like he was only in your life because of a promise. Mia traced patterns on the countertop with her fingertip. Also, I think he was afraid you'd reject him if you knew. That you'd see his attention as obligation rather than genuine care. I turned the bracelet over in my hand, noticing an inscription on the back of the charm that I'd missed initially, to Emma, never stop creating. Love, Dad. This was supposed to be a gift for me, I realized. Something my father wanted me to have when I was older. Mia nodded. Dad said your father left several things with him before he died. Most were sold to help with the medical bills, but this bracelet and the photos were specifically set aside for you to have one day. Tears welled in my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. It wasn't just the connection to my father, though that alone would have been emotional enough, but the realization that James, whom I'd always viewed as primarily Mia's father with only a secondary connection to me, had been honoring a promise to my father all these years. Why tell me now? I asked when I could trust my voice again. Why through you? Mia's expression turned uncomfortable. That's where it gets complicated. After everything with Thomas, Dad started re-evaluating a lot of things, including how he's handled family dynamics over the years. He said he realized he'd allowed me to create an unhealthy competition with you, partly because he felt guilty about the promise to your dad. Like he was trying so hard not to favor you because of that promise that he ended up enabling my worst behaviors instead. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city view. He made me see how the wedding stunt was just the latest in a pattern going back to when our parents first married. How I've always tried to one-up you or take attention away from your accomplishments. I was speechless. This level of self-awareness from Mia was unprecedented. Anyway, she continued, turning back to face me, Dad thought delivering this gift might help me understand some things. About you, about him. About family. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Turns out he was right. It's hard to maintain my righteous indignation when I find out my father has been keeping a decades-old promise to your father. I carefully returned the photos and bracelet to the wooden box, needing time to process this revelation. "Thank you for bringing this to me," I said finally. "It means more than I can express." Mia nodded, some of her usual briskness returning. "Well, that's done then. I should go. I've got packing to do, arrangements to make." "Mia," I said as she headed for the door. "I hope Seattle is everything you're looking for." She paused, hand on the doorknob. "You know what's weird? For the first time, I'm not looking for anything specific. Not trying to prove anything or compete with anyone. It's just a fresh start." She glanced back at me. "It's terrifying. But exciting too, right?" A genuine smile, perhaps the first I'd ever seen from her that wasn't tied to some form of social performance, briefly lit her face. "Yeah. Exciting too." After she left, I sat with a wooden box open on my lap, examining each photo carefully, tracing the inscription on the bracelet with my fingertip. When Ryan came home from work, he found me still sitting there, lost in thoughts of fathers and promises and the complicated bonds of blended families. "What's that?" he asked, setting down his laptop bag and joining me on the couch. "A very unexpected wedding gift," I replied. "And possibly the beginning of a new chapter with Mia." I told him everything, about James's connection to my father, about Mia's surprising self-awareness, about the gift that had been waiting for me all these years. "That's a lot to process," Ryan said when I'd finished. "How are you feeling about it?" "Overwhelmed. Confused. But also strangely at peace." I closed the box carefully. All this time, I thought James tolerated me as an unwanted addition to his perfect family with Mom and Mia. But he was actually keeping a promise to my dad. Watching over me from a distance even before he met Mom. "Do you think your mom knew about James's connection to your father?" I considered this. "I don't think so. Mom's not great at keeping significant emotional information to herself. If she'd known, she would have either told me or dropped obvious hints." Ryan put his arm around me, pulling me against his side. "So what now? Are you going to talk to James about it?" "I think I need to. There's so much I want to ask him." "And Mia? Do you think this changes things between you?" I thought about the glimpse of vulnerability I'd seen in my stepsister, the way she'd admitted her own patterns of behavior without defensive justifications. "Maybe. She's moving to Seattle next month, so there won't be much opportunity for day-to-day interaction. But I think we might have finally found some common ground. Through your fathers, ironically enough. Through men who kept their promises," I corrected gently. "Even when it was difficult." 3 weeks later, I met James for coffee. Our conversation was initially awkward, both of us uncertain how to navigate this new territory, but gradually opened into one of the most honest exchanges we'd ever had. He shared stories about my father from their college days, insights into the man who had become only a fading memory to me. I asked the questions that had been building since Mia's visit, and he answered with thoughtful candor. "I should have told you years ago," he admitted. "But I was afraid it would change how you saw me, make you question every interaction we'd ever had." "It has changed how I see you," I acknowledged. "But not in the way you feared." As we parted, he hugged me for the first time in years, not the brief, obligatory embrace of family gatherings, but a genuine connection between two people linked by promises and shared love for those no longer present. Mia moved to Seattle as planned. Our communication remained sporadic but had lost its undercurrent of competition and resentment. She sent occasional updates about her new job, her exploration of the city, the process of building a life from scratch. I shared news of my promotion at work, Ryan's new project, our tentative discussions about when to start a family. 6 months after my wedding, as Ryan and I celebrated our first half anniversary with takeout and a movie at home, my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Guess who just showed up at my new workplace? A guy who looks exactly like Thomas, calling himself Timothy Barrett. Guess he didn't go far enough when he left town." My heart raced as I read the message. "What did you do?" I texted back. "Took his photo, told my manager he's banned from the store for harassment, then sent the picture to that support group you connected me with. Eliza says he's definitely our guy." I hadn't realized Mia was in contact with Thomas's previous victims, but it made a certain sense. She'd always been someone who processed experiences through external validation and community. "Are you okay?" I asked. Oddly, yes. Seeing him didn't trigger anything except disgust and a weird sense of closure. Also, satisfaction at the look on his face when he recognized me. He literally ran out of the store. I smiled, imagining the scene. "Good for you." A minute later, another text arrived. "Thank you for what you did." I never said it properly before. It was the closest thing to a genuine expression of gratitude I'd ever received from Mia. Progress, indeed. "You're welcome," I replied. "That's what sisters do. Watch out for each other." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Yeah. I guess they do." I set my phone down, turning back to Ryan and our celebration. The path with Mia would never be simple or straightforward, but for the first time since our parents had married 14 years ago, it felt like we were at least walking in the same direction. Thomas, or Timothy, or whatever name he was using now, was still out there, likely seeking his next target. But he'd underestimated Mia, just as he'd underestimated me. Just as people often underestimated the strength that comes from finally seeing clearly, both others and ourselves. My stepsister had announced her engagement the day after mine, scheduled her wedding for the day before, and accidentally invited all my guests to hers instead. I had smiled and congratulated her, then quietly dismantled her plans by exposing the man she thought would be her triumph. 3 weeks later, that man had sat sobbing. Sometimes the most important truths emerge from the most unwelcome challenges. Sometimes the people who seem determined to stand in our way end up leading us to revelations we might never have discovered otherwise. And sometimes, just sometimes, step-siblings who have spent 14 years in Cold War finally find a path to something resembling peace.